Hello, my friends, and welcome to a brand new episode of Discourse in Magic. My name is Jonah Babbins, and in this episode, this episode is different. In this episode, I was interviewed by Jake Strong. Jake Strong is a phenomenal magician who has his own podcast with an interesting twist. It's called 3 Questions, and he asks 3 questions. And we spoke about some of the misunderstood aspects of business in magic. We spoke about how I prepare for my interviews, like when I'm interviewing someone, what it is that I do. And we talk about some of the behind the scenes strengths and weaknesses of the Toronto Magic Company. And not only was this episode cool, but the week before he interviewed Ben Train about the Toronto Magic Company. So kind of watching those two side by side was pretty interesting. Anyways, what I did is I took that episode from Jake's podcast and I copied it over to here so you can hear some behind the scenes. So if you like what you hear, then you'll probably like Jake's podcast. He's interviewing really cool people and I recommend going to check it out. It's called 3 Questions. But for now, just sit back, listen in to me being interviewed and hear about what it's like behind the scenes. Hope you like it. I know I did. Enjoy.
All right. So first and foremost, Jonah, I just want to say thank you so very much for coming on here. It's an absolute pleasure to have you here.
Pleasure to be on. I'm a big fan of magic podcasts, as you can imagine. Yeah. And I love them all. And you put a really interesting concept together. So big fan of that and really excited to be a part of it.
Thank you so much. And one thing that I love is you help a lot of magicians within the business side of show business, which is sometimes very, very misunderstood by a lot of entertainers around the world. So what do you believe is the most misunderstood business aspect of magic?
I guess the most misunderstood thing for magicians' business is where bookings come from. I remember when I was younger, I thought that what I had to do was generate enough people that loved me and my magic so much that just the general buzz word about me was what was going to make me a full-time professional. And while that is possible, I would argue that it's almost a bad mentality to go into this with, because you think that you can talent your way into getting bookings. And talent is amazing, but if nobody's seeing you and you're not performing for the right clients and you're not showcasing yourself the right way, it's not really going to do anything. So I would say the biggest, most misunderstood thing is that I think people think that bookings come as a byproduct of doing really good magic. And I think that, you could argue that bookings come from a byproduct of performing a lot, great quality magic in a lot of environments. But I certainly believe that you need to put in effort to search in specific directions, where people are booking gigs, how people book gigs, what you should be showcasing yourself, how you should be doing that. Like if you don't have a website, if you don't have any photos, you have any videos, if you don't have any of those things, it's going to be really, really hard to book you. And if you're not going out and either building relationships or getting contacts or paying for ads or doing email marketing, whatever it is that you're doing, but you have to actually do something. And I think the most misunderstood thing is that if you just are great at magic, then enough people will know about you and hear about you that you'll just be really, really busy.
For you, what has been the more important way to get those bookings? Has it more been the internet or has it more been the interpersonal relationships that you've made with clients along the years?
I think that it's hard to say that it's one or the other, right? Yeah. The thing that has kept I don't know that I can argue one more than the other. I could say that the thing that has continued to get bookings, right? The thing that keeps me getting more and more bookings is the interpersonal relationships, is the way that you communicate with people who have already hired you, people who are in your world, on your newsletter, people who know about you, the way you give and share, the things you post on social media. That's how you interact. Those are the interpersonal relationships, how you give, how you do. But that being said, I think it's a little bit tough to grow a business. Great way to start a business is with the relationships you already have. But if you want, your business to make 6 figures as a magician, for example, unless you hang out in communities of people who hire magicians for expensive amounts of money, you're probably going to have to dip into some other channels, some other marketing channels, resources, some other outreach strategy, ads, anything related to that. So I think both are important. And I think one is outreach and bringing new people into your world. And then one has more to do with keeping the relationships with the people that are already in your world.
Yeah, and you've been so giving of this information, whether it's posting on Facebook groups, just helping out whoever will comment on the post, or also hosting your podcast, of course, Discourse in Magic, which is a podcast that kind of tackles a ton of subject with some of the biggest names in magic. So kind of switching gears, what does the preparation look like from episode to episode when you're filming that podcast? And how do you kind of filter the questions that you ask for each guest? Whenever you have someone on, I notice that you always have a specific subject. How do you choose that subject per person? And how do you choose what aspects of that subject to go into?
Yeah. So I guess I'll tell you a really interesting story. When I started with the podcast, the intention was, and originally it was a duo. I started the podcast with Tyler Williams, and he stepped away to focus on some other projects. But when it started, the concept was like this. I said, there's enough people interviewing magicians. What I'd love to do is I'd love to bring on a magician who's an expert in a subject and then get them to talk about that subject. And then what ended up happening is that, let's say, I brought on a magician who was an expert in a subject, but that was not the thing that he was excited about. It was not the thing he wanted to talk about. It was not what he was energized about. It was what I was energized about, but maybe he was focused on 15 years ago. So there's probably episode 4 or 5 or something is with Chris Mayhew. And it's the first time, and he's a great friend of mine. I love him to death. I saw him yesterday. And that was the first time that I said I wanted to bring him on to talk about improv, but he talked about a whole bunch of other awesome, amazing, incredible stuff. So now what happens is I title the episodes after the recordings. That's for sure. Yeah. Because I certainly am not going to decide what the episode is going to be about and then close off bringing on a phenomenal magician to talk about whatever the thing is that they are most passionate about in that moment right then, to talk about whatever weird thing of theirs, for better or for worse, but that I am obsessed with. So what I usually do is I think about who it is that I'm speaking to, and I think about some of the not only themes of the podcast, but the things that I'm interested in. So I'm really interested in journey. I'm interested in how people got to where they are, especially as that changes and as that's different. So I ask a lot of questions with respect to that. I'm really, really interested in the talent marketing difference. I think that the best magicians in the world are those who have performed a lot, because that's how you become the best. And to perform a lot, you have to have really, really great marketing, and you have to be good. So it's kind of like you have to be fine and have marketing to go get a lot of bookings. And then once you get a lot of bookings or have a lot of performance experience, then you get to go out there and become an expert. So I really like pulling back that curtain, because, nobody was an expert before they performed a lot. Nobody's the best before they performed a lot. So I ask questions with respect to that. And I like to ask questions either if something is really, really relevant. So if I'm bringing on somebody who is on YouTube or who is, on a platform like that, on TikTok, I would want to be asking them questions there, because I think it's on other magicians' minds, right? What is happening on some of these emerging platforms. And if somebody did anything that is historically important in magic, I will try to talk to them about that. And then other than all of those things, I'll ask them whatever the heck is most interesting to me about them. People send in recommendations for who to have on the podcast. And while I totally appreciate them, and every now and again, somebody sends a recommendation that's great, usually speaking, if somebody sends someone in who I've never, ever, ever heard of before, it's just so unlikely that I'm going to bring them on, because I'm following my journey, the people who have impacted me. And there's so many people who have impacted me. And I love to, selfishly speaking, talk to them about these weird fringe things that they did that have impacted me and how it's changed now. So I guess the first half is kind of in service to the things I like to talk about on the podcast. And then the second half, not by way of the interview, but just what goes through my mind, is the things that I just want to ask them about. And then, of course, there are some certain fringe situations and interviews with certain top magicians like Tamariz, like Teller, like Darren Brown, where I did have to think a little bit more about what kind of questions to ask them. And we can talk about that if you'd like.
Of course. Yeah. Yeah. If you want to go into that, because I love that you've had some of the biggest names in almost, it feels like saying today would be a little bit of an understatement because they're going to be by far all-timers. How has it been to talk to some of those people?
It's been incredible, very exciting. And really, it's nice to talk to these people who have impacted me the most. Like to talk to Teller is not exciting because I'm talking to Teller, as who Teller is to magic, but it's exciting because I'm talking to Teller who Teller is to me, which is half of the duo that I watched growing up and have loved and have been able to talk about. And, their stuff is brilliant for years. And, like who it's been to me, which is like an incredible figure in magic. Same thing about Tamariz. Like there are incredible magicians who are maybe currently more articulate in English about, the Spanish school of magic or other things than Tamariz. Like that's probably true. That being said, reading his books made an impact on me that is indescribable. It changed things in so many ways that it's important to me that I interviewed him. It's not important, it's not just to the world of magic. So in terms of how it feels amazing. It's incredible. It's tough. I don't like competition. I don't like things like that. So it's kind of weird for me to just like, I'm trying to get Penn on the podcast actively, and I will be until he either gets on the podcast or says no, like some certain magicians who I would love to have on, but for some reason weren't interested, and that's fine. So something about that kind of feels a little icky to me, that like some people could say no, and it's like I'm really wanting to because it's really important. But that all being said, Hakuna Matata, that part's, it feels incredible. The thing that I'll share that I was talking about earlier was to interview someone like Tamariz, to give a good example, is he has shared every single one of his thoughts in clean, plain Spanish and English, well articulated already. Like that is actually the biggest, most amazing part about him, is that his writing is so brilliantly clear about a subject that is so abstract, which is theory and magic, the mental journey of the spectator, right? Yeah. So like, that's what's so incredible. So what do? Do I ask him to re-articulate all of the things that he has said in the book so that people can hear him say it out loud? Well, I don't know. I don't know that that's the best use of the one and only interview with him. But on second thought, if I ask him about the material that's inside the book, people who are listening to it, I would have to presuppose that they have all read all of his material enough to be able to participate in some of these things, because they're dense. It's dense. He's written textbooks. So to ask a question about an essay is very hard to do short. It's very hard to make that accessible to everybody. So that was challenging, and that was a challenging interview. Similarly with Teller. Right? I could ask him the same important interview questions that many people have asked him before, that I would love my audience to hear because I know what he has articulated. But I would rather ask him something that is a commentary on one of his questions, but I can't, because that presupposes that a lot of people actually will have heard many of his other interviews, which they probably haven't. So it is a whole new problem when I interview people who I think have done a phenomenal job of sharing their magic and their theories and things like that in the world. So sometimes it poses a problem, and I have to kind of play a little bit with the best of both worlds. But some of those situations are a little bit different. And with a lot of those interviews, there are certain interviews that I prepared tenfold to what I prepared for other interviews, and read every piece of content, reread pieces of content, read books. Like Jamie Ian Swiss is another wonderful example. He's a genius. He's written every thought down.
Yeah.
I remember telling somebody, I said, I'm about to interview Jamie Ian Swiss, but I have to finish one of his other books. And they said, oh, is he making you do that? And I laughed and I said, no, he's not making me do that. He could, but he's not making me do that. I am choosing to read all of them because I need to be able to not ask him a question that he says, well, I explained that answer so clearly in this spot in this location, but also that I can't reference a full essay because it's sometimes something that people have not read before, haven't heard of before. So some interviews I prepare for more than others, but most of all, I like to try to get to what they're most excited about in that moment in time, and try to connect with that as well.
Yeah, and I love hearing that behind the scenes journey of how you get to that stuff, because I feel like not a lot of people know how much behind the scenes you have to do to prepare to make sure that these questions aren't things that they haven't heard before a million times. And also too, like you said, it doesn't assume what other people have known of whoever you're interviewing, what they've done before. It has to be in that common middle ground that is sometimes very, very hard to reach.
100%. And also my little secret, which I don't know to what extent you do or don't, but my little secret is I have an editor. So, not every question makes the cut. Not every single thing that I say is the best question ever. Sometimes I fumble around asking a question because it's a tough question to ask, and you can hear me do it many times. I don't sometimes ask questions perfectly directly. Sometimes guests fumble over answers, and we lose the whole bit. And I think that is the other part of the equation that I think is a part of it, which is, yes, of course I prepare all of that stuff. But I think that I make a point from my editors. I tell them to make me sound less stupid, and most importantly, to make my guests sound as smart as humanly possible. And before my episodes, I have conversations with my guests to tell them about what the episode is going to be about. And I share with them some information. Like one thing I say to them is I go, this is a sentence that I took from Tim Ferriss. And he says, you say, this is not gotcha journalism. The whole entire point of this is made to make you look good. If you say anything that you wish you didn't say, just tell me. It'll be removed. We have an editor. If there's any question I ask that you don't like or don't want, just speak up and say so, and we'll remove it and nobody will even know. And I think that certain things like that put guests at ease a little bit and help them just share whatever, because they know that at any point in time they can go, actually scrap this from the record. And I have had a magician record an incredible interview and at the end say, I don't want this to be aired. And that was frustrating, but that's okay. I think that that's part of the safe space I want to make. I don't want it to feel like I can catch them in saying something, or I want my editor to know that if my guest says something stupid, either, unless you think it's a point that they really, really want to stand by, and that they really want it to put out there, let's try to make them sound smart. Let's give them the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah, that makes so much sense, because I've been lucky enough. Currently, I'm editing through these all myself, and I've noticed that I want to make sure that I make everybody who I'm talking to look so smart, like you said. So it's great to hear that other people are doing that.
Dude, congrats on this podcast. It's really phenomenal. And I used to edit. I edited the first 60 or something of mine. And then it just happened that I hired somebody, and if it makes sense for you, do it. If it doesn't make sense and you love editing, do that. Congrats on this project. It's very exciting. Thank you so very much. And I have one more quick question, if that is all good with you. So obviously you're part of the Toronto Magic Company, which has performed many shows and has also organized a ton of events for magicians. So when it comes to specifically the Toronto Magic Company, what do you think is your biggest strength to help out the company as a whole? And what do you think is your biggest weakness? And on top of that, what do you think Ben said? Because I interviewed Ben a few weeks ago. What do you think Ben said for his own answers? What do I think he said? Yes. Okay, so I guess let me start with him, and then I can do me. I think that he would say that his weakness is something with respect to organization or something with respect to not necessarily, I wouldn't say accountability, but like maybe consistency or something around something there. Those seem like kind of buzzwords for his weakness. For his strength, what he would consider his strength, there's a couple, again, I'm just kind of sharing some buzzwords. I don't know if this is not the right way, but like,
Oh no, it's fine.
I would use the word, so it's how he would consider his strength. So, probably community building, probably, I want to say creativity. Yeah, those are the kind of words you can hear. I just heard his door opening. So I think he heard me talking about him. That's no good. Okay. So that's for that one. And the other one was what I think my weakness and my strength is. Yes.
Yes.
Okay. And by the way, will you tell me how close I was on those?
You were very, very close to both of them. You were both very accurate. Yes.
Can you tell me what
those
were?
Yeah. So he said that that you guys balance each other out. Within his biggest weakness is, like you said, organization, scheduling, all that stuff. And he said that you are on top of that for him 100%. And he said that one of his biggest strengths is, like you said, bringing everybody in, being that whole community aspect. Yeah. So hit the nail right on top of the head with that.
Okay. And I can comment a little bit more on that because I think he's wrong in a couple of ways, but we can talk about that for some good things and bad things. But okay, now to mine. What my biggest weaknesses, and I guess he shared what he thought mine were, right?
Yes.
Okay. So my biggest weakness, I would say, is, and like, man, it's probably baffling that I would say this compared to what Ben said my strength is, but I would say my biggest weakness is organization. My biggest weakness is organization, and my biggest strength, I would say, is online marketing. Like, I think that I know more about online marketing than most anybody that I have access to. Like maybe there's a handful of people, and I'm not trying to be whatever. It's my strength, one thing I'm really good at. So there's a couple people I know that are great that I could go to for advice, but I'm probably one of the best I personally know at online marketing. That's a crazy thing to say. I would never say that about myself, about magic. I would never say to myself, but like, there are obviously famous people or like people on the internet who are way better than me at it. But like, I know a lot of people, and I'm out of people that I think are a ton better than me at it. But I'm ton to be wrong. I would love to be wrong. And if you love online marketing, come talk to me. It's my favorite thing on the planet. So yeah, I would say my weakness is organization and my strength is online marketing. Let me share some context to where I thought Ben was wrong. And I guess it kind of makes sense because I'm talking about my weakness being organization. I think I have really, really good vision, and I think I have really, really good strategy and really, really good planning. But I think that I have really bad organization. Like, my area is an absolute garbage mess. I've never had a color-coded anything in my life. You could put 5 colored pencils down beside me, and no matter what list, chart, or whatever I did, it would all be with 1 pencil. Like every single time. I am a scrap paper kind of guy. There's just crap lying about that in the corner of a thing, I figured something out. I'm like your classic, like math, I went to school for math, like I'm a problem solver. So we've hired people in our organization, and I think a good enough visionary that we hired somebody who does the organization. So when Ben says that all of the organization stuff is covered by Jonah, he's not wrong in the sense that like I had the vision to ensure that to be at the scale that we're at, it needed to be covered, but I am still not organized, and like it still is a fault of mine that if I was 20% more organized, I'm sure I would get 200% more done, in my life, but I'm not. And like, I think that people who are more organized, it has effect on, my company, different things like that, obviously. So that's where I would say that he probably missees what I feel, but I would say he's dead on if he thought, referring to his strength, he's dead on about the organization and about the both community type organization and about, both of that.
Yeah.
I don't know if that made sense.
Oh, it made total sense. And it's just awesome to hear how both you guys kind of balance out and how you balance that partnership, because it's so difficult. But a lot of things that he said was that one of the most important things is to be dead honest sometimes and to just say exactly how you feel, which is also in turn one of the hardest things to do by far a lot of times. So, and I think that what makes you guys thrive so much is because you guys are able to be honest with yourselves. And also, I obviously saw the video online where you were talking about all your biggest failures of, I believe it was either 2020 or the past year.
Yep,
and it was one of the coolest things because you got to see step by step every single thing that you did wrong, and it didn't seem like either of you were really
way
scared.
More wrong than that. Those were just the most exciting ones. Those were just the public colossal ones.
Yeah.
There's plenty of other failures. Those are just the big public colossal ones. What did Ben say that I would say my weaknesses and strengths?
So he kind of circumvented the weaknesses, and he was like, and he was kind of going all around, but he said that your biggest strength was kind of the overall organization of getting everything together and all that stuff. I do not believe he said a weakness, and I was not going to hold him to it. So,
flawless,
yes.
Baby. Let me share a little bit of insight. And maybe it's valuable, maybe not. But two thoughts come to mind. The first is that there's an amazing podcast called Naval, and it's by a really, really brilliant guy named Naval Ravikant. And he's an investor, a philosopher, a thinker. He's really awesome. And he shares something in the podcast that a lot of great companies, a lot of great startups have a creative co-founder and a marketing co-founder. So somebody who can create new things and really has the vision to make stuff, and then somebody who knows how to sell stuff. And that sometimes there comes a time where, there is somebody who does both. But if you look through some examples in history, like Apple, there was Steve Jobs, but there was also, forgive my memory, what's the name of the other guy that was with
I think Tim Cook. Is that correct?
No, Tim Cook is the one now.
No,
but whatever.
Yes.
Someone smarter will remember. And if you look through other examples in history, there's
Steve Wozniak.
There it is, Steve Wozniak. Thank
yes,
you. Thank you. It came to you. Yeah. That's just the first example that came to mind, but it happens a lot where where you basically have that partnership, and sometimes you have one person that has both. I think Ben and I are very fortunate where both of us are creative and both of us are great at sales, but I would say that I am the marketing brains and he is the creative brains. And not totally, and that's part of the fact that we're both pretty good at this, in both senses, but it's nice to know that, like, I trust his creative, like when I imagine a drawing and I try to draw it, I can never draw what I imagined. Like when I imagine a video and I try to record it, like I can never record what I videoed. So like he can kind of do those things and like I can't. But with marketing, like I make pretty darn good estimates of exactly how many tickets we're going to sell or exactly how much it's going to cost or exactly, how long it's going to take to pull something off. And that's because I kind of know those things very well. So we work together very well in that regard.
That's awesome. Well, Jonah, thank you so very much for coming on here. Like I said, it was an absolute pleasure to have you here.
Jake, this was a pleasure. Thanks for having me. Thanks for putting together such an awesome podcast. A pretty cool concept in the world of magic. So thank you for that. And I know that you're doing some great work with the open mic and just doing some amazing stuff on the internet with magic. So keep doing what you're doing, and excited to hear and see more of your face and your name on the internet and in the magic world.
Thank you so very much.
Well, there you have it. I hope you liked the episode, and I hope, of course, that you learned something. As always, if this was fun for you, if it was cool, if you wanted to brag about it to your friends that you're so smart now, then share it on Facebook, on Instagram. It'll mean the world. And number 2, if you liked it, go check out Jake's podcast. He asks 3 questions. It's short, it's punchy, it's sweet, and it's pretty cool. And Jake's a cool guy. I hope you liked this. I know I did. Thanks for being here, and I'll see you next Thursday. Peace.